Welcome back to Sledgehammer Horror, guys. I am Ken Sledge, and today I'm so proud to announce I have a good friend of mine. We've been friends since we were little kids. He does the Journey with a Cinephile podcast, as well as he is an author, has his book, Ghouls. I will have the link for that down here in the description as well. Make sure you're checking this out. Dave Garrett. Dave, how you doing today, man?
I'm doing good. How about yourself?
I'm doing very well, man. It is so good to see you. For the people that don't know, like I said, me and Dave grew up together, stealing cars in Jasper, Michigan. So, dude, it's so awesome to have you on here. I love the podcast. How you holding up in quarantine, though, man? Everything going okay?
I mean, to be honest, actually, my job, they ended up pretty much like 2 or 3 weeks into everything, had us all starting to work from home, and it's pretty much indefinite like that. And I feel like I pretty transitioned well into that type of situation because it makes it nice when I'm kind of done with my work that I can kind of just relax and do other things and just monitor my stuff until, the day ends. So I actually holding up pretty fine. I'm kind of an introvert a lot of times where every now and then I kind of have my fix where I need to go out and see people. And we've been doing that pretty safe down here for the most part. But so, I'm kind of getting my fix there and just kind of enjoying, doing my hobbies and whatnot.
That's awesome, man. Journey with a Cinephile, a horror movie podcast. You can download that at any podcast location. I strongly recommend it. What can you tell the viewers about your podcast, Dave?
Well, I kind of got into podcasts, like listening to them probably like 3 or 4 years ago. And the more and more I listened to it, the more and more I was like, man, I kind of want to do something like that myself, just to and then I as I started doing it, realized I wanted to more focus on ones that I've never seen before. And then especially like lately I've been doing like the journey through the aughts type thing where I've been doing a new movie with one that's like been and a year ending in 0, just so I can kind of fill in some of the gaps on movies that I've never seen from the past. And so that's been kind of a way where I can kind of do something like that. And then, like mini reviews, I'll throw stuff on there I've seen, 100 times, but I'll also it just keeps me trying to see new movies that instead of just going to the ones that I've seen over and over again. Sure.
It gives you that drive to go out there and see something new. So before we get started in the episode, let me ask you this, since you are new into the horror stuff as well. What's the most recent horror movie you've seen that you think is probably the best horror movie you've seen lately? Something you can recommend to people.
I know for this year so far, like the best one that I've probably seen it technically was made a few years ago, but it's from Asia. So that didn't get like any sort of wide release until this year, is A Record of Sweet Murder, or it's something along those lines where it's a record of murder or something like that. And it's a guy reaches out to a friend of his who is a journalist, and it has her bring a cameraman with her. And it's pretty much him saying that these people are going to show up, he's going to kill them, and it's going to bring somebody back from their childhood back to life. And it has this wild, it feels like they literally just recorded it straight through and everything. And I watched it earlier this year, and it blew me away with kind of how everything ends up playing out with that one.
Do you know, is it still streaming? Do you remember where you streamed it on?
When I first watched it, one of my buddies had sent me a link, but I believe it's on Tubi now for free. Okay. And so that was one where I was really shocked with how well that was made.
Awesome. So yeah, I'm always looking for new movies to watch, man. So I appreciate that. Speaking of horror movies, let's get into what started you on your roller coaster of a ride. Your first horror movie was?
I'm pretty sure it's within a few different ones, but I'm pretty sure Dawn of the Dead was one of the first ones that I've watched, actually.
Yes, man. And it's such a good movie, man. I absolutely adore that movie. It's still to this day one of my favorite movies. George Romero, I think, is, he was the man,
Right.
It's something that he started something that has never slowed down.
Exactly.
So, do you remember about how old you were when you watched it?
I know one of the earliest memories was like 4 or 5, because my dad is really into zombies. So my sister and I would grow up watching, I never really watched the original Night of the Living Dead, only because I was so pretentious as a child where I wouldn't watch black and white. So I always watched the 90s remake, but then me and her would always watch Dawn and Day all the time. And we also would watch Return of the Living Dead. So I know it's probably around 4 or 5 is one of my first times that I actually remember, actually remembering seeing it.
Now, when being that young, was there a certain scene that stuck with you harder than anything else? Like, what was the scene that you think you remember the most
I
from
mean,
that time?
obviously, like the ending sequence where everybody's getting tore up in the mall is probably one. But one that always stuck out to me actually is when they are moving the trucks to block off all of the doors and everything like that. Just because that soundtrack that he synced up with it of Goblin is just unreal. And I, to this day, can, like, if I hear that, like, that scene will just run through my head. And especially
Yeah.
when, as you're seeing, like, the one guy to start losing his mind, where you're just like, what is going on here? And it took me till I got a little bit older to be like, oh no, he's losing his mind because everything's just falling apart around him. But like that scene always kind of sticks with me.
Yeah, and it's one scene that stuck with me. It doesn't hold up as well now is when they shoot the kids in the house.
Yes.
You know, like as a little kid, I was like, oh my God, they killed those kids.
Right.
You watch now, you're like, oh, that's pretty neat how they did that.
Right.
Dawn of the Dead, while we're on this subject, what is your opinion on the 2003 remake of Dawn of the Dead?
I really liked it when it first came out. I liked how because for me, a lot of times a remake, it's not always the greatest when you do a shot-for-shot type thing, just because, like, why would I watch the remake when I can watch the original? I did like at first how they switch it up a little bit with, like, the running, and they kind of do a little bit different things with it, especially, like, you know, creating the vehicle and everything to kind of get over there. Unfortunately, it's one, though, that every time I watch it, it kind of goes down a little bit more for me. I still enjoy it, but I don't love it anymore like I did when I first saw it.
And like you said, the older we get, the more we pick up on things we didn't notice when we were young. Like, if you would have asked me, you know, 15 years ago, I'd have told you the color Night of the Living Dead blew the black and white one away. But, you know, older now, I love the ending of the black and white one. It's so much more upsetting to know that he survived, you know. So I definitely get what you're saying with that. Let's talk about some death, though. You know how I love the death scenes.
Yeah.
What was your favorite death scene, your favorite kill in Dawn of the Dead?
Probably the one that sticks with me the most is even in the one that you don't even actually get to see it, is when I believe it's Roger when he comes back and just seeing his face when he like looks around, and then it actually affects me more as an adult because like you can see everybody's bummed about what's going to happen, and then it's synced up so well with the sound where on TV it's like the guy starts yelling quiet, and then it's just everybody is just empty inside when you see them. So that's probably the one that sticks with me, and it's not even on camera when it happens.
Right. And you keep bringing up the sound, and it's something I just had a conversation with a couple friends of mine on the phone, and we were talking about how horror movies in general, when it comes to soundtrack, are so much more superior, in this is just opinion, than other genres of film. And I'm not trying to slam any genre of film, but I mean, look at Halloween. You know, most people that haven't even seen Halloween know the Halloween theme. Jaws. People that haven't seen Jaws know the da-dun.
I just heard that on a podcast where they're talking about how ingrained that soundtrack is for everybody. Where another one is Psycho, where the like shower scene. There's people that have never seen the movie will do the knife stabbing and use that exactly, and they've never even seen it, but they know what it is.
Yeah, and it's amazing to me how when you think of horror movies, again, when we're young, we don't really put into context how the sound and the soundtrack and the lighting, how it all comes together. And now that we're adults and we're both, you know, very much into horror films as we've always been together, it's one of those things where you really gain an appreciation. You watch Nightmare 3 and the soundtrack to that and the sounds to that, you know, it's just it's so amazing, man, how they can do this and make it doesn't always work. I mean, look at Halloween 5. When they play that clown music when the cops are walking down the stairs. You know, sometimes it's a miss. But more often than not, man, the sounds and the soundtracks are amazing.
That's for sure. Yeah. No, I agree. I'm right there with you.
So let me go this direction with you. You are a zombie fan. I know that. Big Dave zombie fan. Shout out to Big Dave, man, even though he's not there. He was my baseball coach as a kid. Love that man to death, man. Tell him I said hi when you see him.
Will do.
You being in horror genre as much as me, do you prefer the practical effects or the CGI effects in a horror film?
100% practical. I mean, there's just something with it if you do CGI right, I'm fine with it. I have no issues. But a lot of times, like, when you can do something practical, even if it doesn't necessarily look good, because, I mean, there's a lot of times I'll see dummy deaths in movies where I'm like, that's a dummy. Like, I can clearly tell that's not a person. Still trying to do it practical is just unreal to me, though. If you can at least try, I will give you way more credit than just trying to do it in post-production with a computer.
Mm-hmm. And now where I just had a conversation with, I keep bringing up other people, I'm sorry, but
Yeah, no.
you're right. When CGI is done right and you mix it with a practical effect,
Yep.
it can be fantastic. There are times when it flops. Like the big thing I think of is Freddy vs. Jason,
Yep.
when he cuts in half Jay Jr., and you got that CGI blood. It just looks so fake,
Right.
you know?
Mm-hmm.
If it's going to look fake, give me practical.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, I'm right there with you.
I'm glad that you appreciate the practical effects too. We were talking about Jaws. I mean, I think it's amazing that you barely get to see Bruce. You know, the
I
shark.
think it's more effective.
Absolutely. You're talking about Psycho. Look at how Hitchcock did his things, you know.
Yep.
A lot of stuff happens in the shadows, and it lets you use your imagination.
Right.
So these movies that we watched when we were younger, we go back, and sometimes they're not even as bad as we remember them, just because our imagination went wild while we were watching them.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, one big things with that is actually Texas Chainsaw Massacre. So many people, like, when they see it once and then don't see it for a while, like, oh my God, the movie's so bloody. I went back and watched it, like, probably last year at the theater. Like, the one that I go to all the time around here when it was open, they were showing a bunch of, like, old ones. There's really no blood in that. And the only blood you really see that I can remember is the dinner scene right there at the end. And that's only because they're filling blood into a bucket. And that's really the only things that you can, that outside of that, you don't really see anything, but it's what you think you see is way worse.
Bingo. And I always bring up Texas Chainsaw. God, I can tell we grew up together. This is so awesome to me. But it's that thing where when we're kids, man, it's way scarier to me to see that hand go up and then you see the wall and you just see the shadow, you know, the silhouette. You know, that's way more effective in my brain than watching a guy get his head twisted around in a machine in Saw 3. You know, like, not slamming it. I love the Saw series, man, but I'd rather be scared than grossed out.
For sure.
So let me go scream on you here real quick. We talked about your first horror movie, but what's your favorite horror movie?
I mean, it actually is Dawn of the Dead as well. Even though technically Day of the Dead is the better made film. And as I get older, I start looking at it. I like bleakness in some of my films, especially with how they do it in Day of the Dead. Dawn is still my favorite, but I would probably, I mean, Day is way better made though, in my opinion. And just how they end that and kind of how just bleak it is, where like the world has ended and it's them trying to figure out everything, it really does resonate with me more with kind of my taste in films now though.
Sure. So I always do this at the end. Skull count. You said Dawn of the Dead your favorite, so I can probably guess where this is going. 0 being the worst, 5 being the best. Where are we ranking Dawn?
I have to come in with a 5 on that one.
Yep. And it's one of those things where I look at this the same way that I look at Alien. The same way that I look at, you know, Psycho. Without this movie, the zombie genre doesn't exist.
Exactly.
Without Psycho, the slasher genre doesn't exist. You know, so it's things like that you even if you're not a fan of this movie, which I don't know anybody, I don't think I've ever met anybody that's not a fan of Dawn, you respect it, you know, like this is something I've talked about you on the podcast before, anybody that's really paid attention, a movie that you showed me that has stuck with me my entire life. It is the number 1 on the funniest movies I've ever seen in my life. It is Big Money Hustlers, the ICP movie.
Oh yeah,
I remember. I wasn't an ICP fan, and you were like, "I don't give a shit, dude. You're watching this movie with me," and I laughed the whole movie, man. So I got it. I have it on DVD right now, man. So I still watch that film. So I owe you so much.
I appreciate that.
So much personality comes from that. Like I said, if you haven't picked up Gold by Dave, I'm gonna have an Amazon. Is it on Amazon?
Yes, it is. Yep.
Can they purchase the book? Yep. I'll put the
link
on there in the description. Awesome. You guys got to check this out. I'm pretty sure I'm one of the characters in it. So, Dave, thank you so much for coming on, man. Don't go anywhere. I got a couple more questions for you. Everybody else, thank you so much for tuning in. Remember, stay what you are, guys, and we'll talk to you here soon.